At exactly 3:17 a.m., every recording device in the house turned itself on. Not one, all of them. Phones began recording from locked screens. Cameras that hadn't moved in years adjusted, slowly, like they were trying to look at something. Baby monitors filled with a sound no baby was making. And then it arrived. A low, metallic tone. Not loud, not sudden. It slid into the room, like it had been waiting for everyone to fall asleep. Too slow to be a machine. Too precise to be human. People later said it didn't come from the walls, or the ceiling, or any direction at all. It felt internal. 7 seconds. That's all it took. 7 seconds for heart rates to synchronize. 7 seconds for eyes to open at the same time. 7 seconds for sleep to become something their bodies no longer trusted. No one screamed. No one moved. They just listened, because somehow they knew the sound was listening back. After that night, no one slept through 3:17 again. Some never slept at all. And the most disturbing part, every single person described the same thought. The moment the sound stopped, it knows I'm awake now. So ask yourself this: what kind of sound doesn't scare you, but quietly removes your ability to ever feel safe with your eyes closed? There is a moment, just before the sound, when the world feels suspended. Not asleep, not awake. A thin space where the body is quiet, but the mind is unguarded. This is the hour most people never remember passing through, because at 3:17 a.m., the body is supposed to be defenseless. Heart rate at its lowest, body temperature dropped, dream cycles at their deepest. Hospitals are quiet at this hour. Roads are empty. Emergency lines go silent. It is the hour shift workers dread, the hour insomniacs lose track of, the hour grieving people stare at the ceiling and count breaths. Across different places, different cities, different years, the people who would later hear the sound were doing ordinary things. Sleeping beside spouses, dozing off with the television still on, falling asleep mid-text, listening to rain, listening to silence. Some of them had lived in their homes for decades. Some had just moved in days earlier. Some were children. Some were elderly. Some lived alone. They had nothing in common. Different religions, different routines, different fears, except for one detail. Every single one of them was asleep or drifting toward it when the clock changed. 3:16, 3:17. That minute was never meant to be noticed, because when the body wakes itself at 3:17 a.m., it isn't responding to noise. It's responding to something older, something buried in instinct, something that once meant danger. Doctors later called it stress. Psychologists called it coincidence. Authorities called it unrelated incidents. But none of them could explain why the recordings all began at the same second. Why the sound appeared identical across devices that had never been connected. Or why people who heard it described the same sensation before it began. A pressure behind the eyes, a sudden stillness in the room, and the overwhelming certainty that waking up was a mistake. 3:17 a.m., the hour the body isn't meant to wake. The people affected would later be grouped together under one label: witnesses. But before that word existed, they were just ordinary people living ordinary lives. Unaware, they were already part of something unfolding. There was Daniel, a night shift security guard who slept through daylight and trusted cameras more than people. He had worked the same building for 11 years. Nothing had ever happened there. No break-ins, no alarms, just empty hallways and humming lights. There was Mara, a single mother who fell asleep every night with the television on low volume so the silence wouldn't feel so heavy. Her apartment was small, clean, predictable. She slept lightly, but she slept. There was Jonah, a college student who stayed up too late scrolling through his phone, convincing himself he was tired when he wasn't. 3:17 a.m. meant nothing to him. It was just another number on a glowing screen. There was Mrs. Hargrave, 72 years old, widowed, who woke every night around 3 to pray. She believed waking at that hour was a blessing, a quiet moment with God before the world stirred. Different lives, different ages, different beliefs. No shared history, no shared trauma. And yet, when investigators later compared notes, they noticed something unsettling. Every single person described the night before the sound as unusually calm. No nightmares, no stress dreams, no racing thoughts. Several said it was the deepest sleep they'd had in months. One witness described it as being gently lowered into the dark. Another said it felt like the world exhaled. And then, without warning, their bodies betrayed them. Eyes opening before thought, breath catching before fear, muscles tightening for no reason they could name. No alarms, no voices, no movement, just that moment when the body decides. Now is not safe. They checked the time, every one of them. 3:17 a.m., not 3:16, not 3:18, as if something precise had been waiting. At first, they told no one. Because how do you explain waking up terrified? Without being scared? How do you describe hearing something? That didn't sound loud, but felt close? Most of them tried to go back to sleep. Almost none of them succeeded. The hours after were worse. Not because of panic, but because of clarity. Thoughts sharpened. Rooms felt too detailed. Shadows too defined. Several witnesses said they could hear their own heartbeat, like it was coming from outside their chest. Others reported the sense of being observed, not watched, evaluated. Morning eventually arrived. Sunlight, traffic, normal sounds returning, and with it came relief, the kind that convinces you. Last night was just your imagination. They went to work, made breakfast, answered messages. They laughed, they functioned, but something subtle had changed. That night, when bedtime came again, they didn't drift. They waited, not consciously, not deliberately. Their bodies did it for them, eyes snapping open every few minutes, dreams cutting off too early, sleep feeling thin, fragile. And when they checked the clock again, 3:16 a.m., their hearts began to race. Because this time, they were awake before the hour arrived, waiting to hear whether the sound would return. Some held their breath, some covered their ears, some pressed record, just in case. And somewhere, unseen and unheard, something took note, because the sound wasn't meant to be chased. It was meant to be noticed. And now, they were paying attention. The place itself never stood out. No legends, no rumors, no warning signs. Just an ordinary residential stretch that could have existed anywhere. 3 low-rise apartment buildings pressed shoulder to shoulder. Paint faded by sun and rain. Balconies cluttered with plastic chairs, drying laundry, forgotten flower pots. A narrow parking lot where cars sat unmoved for days at a time. Streetlights that flickered but never fully died. During the day, it was noise and routine. Children running late for school. A bus stopping too long at the corner. Someone always arguing on a phone call near the stairwell. Music leaking through thin walls. Doors opening, doors closing. At night, it became something else. Quiet but not empty. Lights glowing behind curtains. Televisions murmuring through walls. The occasional cough. Water pipes clicking as showers shut off. Normal sounds. The kind you stop noticing once a place feels like home. Daniel, the security guard, slept from 9 in the morning until mid-afternoon. His phone stayed face down beside the bed. Alarm always set. Routine never broken. When he slept hard, trained by years of exhaustion. Mara put her daughter to bed at 8 sharp. Cartoons off. Nightlight on. She scrolled through her phone for exactly 15 minutes before sleep, every night, no exceptions. She liked knowing when a day ended. Jonah stayed up past midnight most nights. Headphones in, messages half read. Sleep came whenever it felt like it. Sometimes at 1, sometimes at 3, sometimes not at all. Mrs. Hargreave turned off every light except the hallway lamp before bed. Her phone stayed powered down on the kitchen counter. She believed devices interfered with rest and prayer. Other residents followed patterns just as predictable. Couples who slept back-to-back without touching. Insomniacs who gave up trying. Early risers who never saw midnight. Late sleepers who never saw sunrise. Phones charged overnight. Wi-Fi humming quietly. Security cameras blinking red dots that meant nothing to anyone anymore. No one locked doors differently. No one double-checked windows. No one felt watched. Because nothing had ever happened there. No break-ins. No one explained this. No police tape. No headlines. The most exciting thing the building had seen in years was a burst pipe and a noise complaint. People trusted their routines. They trusted sleep. They trusted the silence between midnight and morning. The long stretch where the world does nothing and expects nothing from you. And that trust showed in the smallest details. Phones left on nightstands instead of under pillows. Doors left unlocked inside apartments. Curtains half drawn. Baby monitors left on even when babies slept soundly. No one muted notifications. No one powered down devices. Because there was no reason to. Sleep came easily here. Even the anxious slept better than usual. Even the grieving found rest. Even the ones who hated the dark stopped fighting it. That's what made the change so hard to recognize. Because when something finally did go wrong, it didn't break the routine. It slipped into it. It didn't announce itself with noise or violence or fear. It waited for the moment everyone trusted most. The moment when phones were charging, when bodies were still, when minds were unguarded, and later, when they tried to remember if anything had fell off before that night. No one could. No strange visitors. No odd sounds. No bad feelings. Just sleep. Deep. Uninterrupted. Comforting. The kind you don't question. So ask yourself, if this were your home, with your routines, your habits, your sense of safety, would you have noticed anything was wrong? The first disturbance didn't announce itself. It didn't arrive with panic. It didn't come with fear. It came as confusion. Daniel was the first to notice, though he wouldn't say that out loud until much later. Years of night shifts had trained his body to wake sharply, but this was different. He woke already alert, eyes open, breath steady, heart pounding, but not fast enough to be fear. He reached for his phone without thinking. 3:17 a.m. The room was quiet. Too quiet. No alarms. No voices on the radio he always forgot to turn off. No movement from the hallway. Then he felt it. Not a sound exactly. A pressure, low and dense, like standing too close to heavy machinery without hearing it run. It didn't vibrate the walls. It didn't shake the bed. It pressed inward. Daniel sat up, waiting for it to come from somewhere. It never did. 7 seconds later, it was gone. He stared at the dark long after, convincing himself it was exhaustion. Night shift did strange things to the brain. At the time, it didn't seem important. Later, they would realize it was a warning. Mara's experience came 2 nights later. She woke mid-breath, hands still curled around the edge of the blanket. Her television was on, volume low, just as she always left it. The cartoon characters were frozen on screen. Paused. She hadn't touched the remote. Then the sound arrived. Not loud enough to wake her daughter. Not sharp enough to hurt. Just present. She later described it as a feeling that hummed. Like metal stretched thin. Like a wire pulled too tight, but never snapping. She held still, afraid that moving might make it worse. 7 seconds. That's how long the pressure lasted. She checked the time. 3:17 a.m. Her first thought was the building. Old wiring. Bad electricity. A power surge. She unplugged the television the next morning. At the time, it didn't seem important. Later, they would realize it was a warning. Jonah didn't wake because of the sound. He woke before it, wide awake for no reason, staring at the ceiling, phone still glowing in his hand. The moment the time changed, he felt it. Not in his ears, in his teeth. A faint metallic sensation like biting aluminum foil, except he wasn't biting anything. He pulled his headphones out, convinced they were malfunctioning. The sound didn't get louder. It didn't get softer. It didn't come from the headphones at all. 7 seconds. Gone. Jonah laughed it off. Stress. Caffeine. Too much screen time. He tweeted about it as a joke. Deleted the post 10 minutes later. At the time, it didn't seem important. Later, they would realize it was a warning. Mrs. Hargreave was awake already when it happened. Kneeling beside her bed, hands folded, eyes closed. She felt it before she heard it. A heaviness in the chest. A pause in her breathing. The sound threaded through the silence, not interrupting her prayer, but sliding beneath it. She stopped mid-sentence. Not out of fear, out of respect, because whatever it was, it felt like something that should not be spoken over. 7 seconds passed. She checked the clock. 3:17 a.m. For the first time in years, she did not resume praying. At the time, it didn't seem important. Later, they would realize it was a warning. Over the next week, the reports multiplied, quietly, casually, in passing conversations. Did you wake up last night? Did you hear something? Did your phone act weird around 3? Always the same time, always the same duration, always the same uncertainty. No one described it the same way, but no one described it differently either. Not loud, not directional, not something you could point to. Felt more than heard. Some blamed the pipes. Others blamed power fluctuations. A few blamed stress. Sleep deprivation became the most popular explanation, until people started comparing clocks, until they realized the time never changed. 3:17 a.m. Not once, not even when daylight savings shifted. And that's when doubt began to settle. Because coincidences drift. Patterns don't. Still, no one panicked. No one called authorities. No one left. Because the sound didn't hurt them. It didn't threaten. It didn't demand attention. It simply arrived and left. But every single time it happened, it took something small with it. A little trust in sleep. A little comfort in darkness. A little certainty that waking up meant nothing was wrong. At the time, none of them thought that mattered. Later, they would understand. It wasn't meant to scare them. It was meant to prepare them. The moment everything changed came from curiosity. Not bravery. Not recklessness. Curiosity. His name was Elias Rowe. 34 years old. Recently divorced. Recently relocated. An audio technician by trade. Freelance. Meticulous. Patient. Elias had spent his life believing one thing above all else. Every sound has a source. Every frequency has a cause. He had grown up around noise. Studios. Control rooms. Headphones pressed tight against his ears for hours at a time. Silence made him uneasy. Patterns comforted him. When whispers about the sound began circulating in the building, Elias listened politely and skeptically. Mass suggestion. Sleep deprivation. A classic feedback loop. That's what he told them. But when Jonah showed him the waveform, when Mara let him hear the baby monitor playback, when Daniel quietly mentioned the cameras waking themselves, Elias stopped dismissing. Because the recordings weren't wrong. They were incomplete. So Elias decided to do what no one else would. He would listen to it on purpose. He prepared carefully. Soundproofed room. Professional headphones. Playback isolated from external speakers. He normalized the file. Removed noise floors. Stripped compression artifacts. He set the volume low. Safe. Controlled. He told himself he would stop it before 7 seconds. Just enough to confirm what it was. Just enough to prove it wasn't special. At 3:14 a.m., he pressed play. The room was silent. At 3:16, his heartbeat began to climb. He told himself that was anticipation. At 3:17, the sound arrived, and something else arrived with it. The first layer was familiar. The same pressure, the same inward pull, the same sensation of being gently, but firmly noticed. But beneath it, there was another sound. Not louder, not sharper, older. A slow modulation that wasn't present in the original file. Not recorded, generated. The waveform changed in real time, as if the sound was responding. Elias reached for the keyboard and stopped, because his hands were shaking, but his mind was calm. Too calm. The second layer wasn't heard. It was recognized, like a word you don't remember learning, like a name you don't remember being called. 7 seconds passed, but the sound didn't stop. The playback ended. The room did not. The recording equipment continued to register activity. Frequencies moving where no audio should exist. Then Elias sat down, slowly, deliberately, and did not get back up. When Daniel broke into the apartment the next morning, everything was intact. No signs of struggle. No damage. No noise complaints. Elias was seated in the chair, eyes open, unblinking, pulse steady, breathing shallow, alive, but unreachable. No response to sound. No response to touch. No response to pain. Just a faint tension in the muscles, as if his body was waiting for something else to finish. The recording equipment was still running. The last visible waveform showed something impossible. A shape that extended beyond the 7-second mark. Not sound, a continuation. Authorities removed the equipment. Doctors ran tests. Specialists used words like dissociative state and neurological shock. No diagnosis explained why Elias's eyes tracked the clock. No one explained why his heart rate spiked at 317 every night. No one explained why the second layer never appeared again on any recording. Only once. Only when it was invited. The residents stopped talking openly after that. Phones stayed face down. Recordings deleted. Questions swallowed. Because the pattern was clear now. The sound could be noticed. It could be recorded, but could not be engaged. And after that night, no one slept past 3:16 again. The answers did not arrive all at once. They surfaced slowly, in fragments, in half-remembered research papers, in forgotten projects that were never meant to be connected to living people. Jonah was the one who followed the trail. Not because he was brave, because he couldn't stop thinking. Before all this, Jonah had been ordinary in the most forgettable way. Computer science major, average grades, a habit of falling down internet rabbit holes at night. He knew how to search without being noticed, how to read things that weren't indexed anymore. And when sleep left him completely, he filled the nights with digging. Old academic archives, defunct government contractors, patents filed and quietly withdrawn. What he found didn't mention the building, didn't mention residents, didn't mention sound. It mentioned frequency windows, project from decades ago, buried under benign names and discontinued funding. Research into communication during deep sleep, not dream interpretation, not hypnosis, synchronization. The idea was simple. The human brain, during its deepest sleep cycle, drops its defenses. Not mentally, biologically. Heart rate lowers, body temperature drops, conscious filters thin, at precisely one narrow window, around 3:17 a.m. for most adults. The brain becomes receptive in a way it never is while awake. The experiment was never about waking people up. It was about seeing who was already listening. Daniel recognized the pattern immediately. Security work had taught him this much. Systems don't fail randomly. They fail where stress already exists. The documents Jonah shared showed early trials. Low-frequency signals broadcast unintentionally through power grids, underground cabling, communication infrastructure. Not loud, not invasive, just present. Test subjects who slept deeply never reacted, but a small percentage did. People whose brains surfaced naturally at that exact moment. Light sleepers, shift workers, the grieving, the anxious, the devout. People already hovering near awareness. They weren't woken by the signal. They were confirmed by it. Mrs. Hargreave understood before anyone else said it aloud. She had always believed waking at that hour was spiritual. She now realized it had made her vulnerable. Not chosen. Available. The sound didn't target people. It synchronized with them, matched their internal rhythms, slid into a moment where the mind was quiet enough to register it, and the body was alert enough to respond. That was why the sound felt internal. That was why recordings barely captured it. That was why fear never arrived first. Fear is loud. This wasn't. This was a handshake, a check-in, a pulse saying, yes, you're here. And once that confirmation happened once, the brain learned it. The body adapted. Sleep became impossible because sleep was the doorway, and the sound didn't need to knock anymore. The abandoned experiment never finished. Funding collapsed. Researchers moved on. Equipment was decommissioned, but the signal didn't end. It leaked through aging infrastructure, through modern devices never designed to filter it out, through systems that unknowingly carried it forward. And when someone finally listened back, intentionally, at the precise moment the body aligned, the signal did what it was designed to do. It completed itself, not by entering the mind, but by being recognized by it. That was the part no one wanted to accept. The sound didn't wake them. It didn't invade them. It didn't attack them. It simply confirmed something that was already true. They had been listening long before they ever heard it. And that's when they understood the real mistake. What followed was not chaos. There were no riots, no public warnings, no headlines, just erosion. Sleep vanished first. Not suddenly, not dramatically, in fragments. Daniel managed 5 minutes at a time, 6 on good nights. He timed it once, stopped after that. Each time he drifted, his body snapped awake, heart racing, muscles tight. As if something had nudged him back across a line he was no longer allowed to cross. He stopped lying down altogether. Mara slept in a chair beside her daughter's bed. Not to rest, to watch. Her eyes closed occasionally. Her mind never did. She aged quickly after that. Dark circles set in. Hands shook when she poured water. Jonah tried medication. Prescriptions escalated. Names blurred together. Nothing pushed him past the threshold. Mrs. Hargreave stopped aging altogether. At least, that's how it looked. She sat in her apartment, fully dressed, lights on, unmoving for hours. Neighbors checked on her daily. She thanked them, always polite, always awake. Within months, the building began to empty. Tenants left quietly. Leases were broken without explanation. Moving trucks arrived at odd hours. No forthwiths. Some apartments were abandoned midlife. Beds unmade. Dishes in sinks. Phones left charging. Others were cleared out completely. Paint peeled. Mail stacked. The sound still came, but fewer people were there to hear it. Recordings disappeared. Hard drives failed. Cloud backups corrupted. Audio files lost headers, timestamps, structure. Every copy of the extended playback, the one Elias triggered, was gone. Not deleted. Unreadable. Technicians couldn't recover it. They stopped trying. Authorities arrived late and stayed briefly. Marca vehículos. Unlabeled uniforms. No questions asked that required answers. They took equipment. They sealed rooms. They replaced locks. The official report cited electrical interference, mass sleep disruption, stress-related hallucinations. The phrase shared anomaly appeared once. It was removed in the final version. Medical professionals were instructed to treat symptoms only. Insomnia, dissociation, anxiety. No mention of sound. No mention of time. The building was condemned quietly. Structural concerns. Wiring issues. Safety hazards. The sign went up without ceremony. No demolition followed. Just fences. Just silence. Former residents scattered. Some vanished from records entirely. Others appeared in clinics, shelters, roadside motels. They never slept. They never spoke about 317. They learned not to, because talking about it brought the pressure back. Not the sound, just the sensation, the awareness. Cold, factual, detached, like a system running exactly as intended. And somewhere, buried in infrastructure, threaded through signals that never shut off, the frequency continued, unchanged, patient, waiting for the next body. That woke on its own, at 3:17 a.m. The last report didn't come from the building. That place was finished, condemned, silent. This one came from somewhere else. A different city, different layout, different residents. A detached house this time. 2 floors, new wiring, recently renovated. The report was filed by a sleep clinic. Routine intake, unremarkable patient history. The subject was a man in his early 40s. No criminal record, no diagnosed conditions. Stable job, recently moved for work. Married, no children. He told the doctor he hadn't slept properly in weeks. Not because of nightmares, not because of anxiety, because every night at the same time, his body woke itself up. Alert, focused, heart racing without fear. When asked why he sought help now, he hesitated. Then he said something the doctor later wrote down verbatim. I didn't hear it at first. I just felt like something was checking if I was awake. The doctor asked what he meant by it. The patient didn't answer. He asked for water instead. The intake form shows the next question circled twice. Time of waking. The patient wrote carefully. 3:17 a.m. Local time. No devices were found malfunctioning in the house. No unusual electrical activity. No recorded disturbances. But during a routine equipment test, a technician noted something odd. For 7 seconds, the monitoring system registered a pressure response. No audible sound. No visual trigger. Just a physiological reaction. The file was flagged, then reclassified, then buried. 3 days later, the patient stopped attending appointments. Phone disconnected. Address vacated. Neighbors reported lights on at night. Always on. No movement. No one answered the door. When authorities entered the house, they found the bedroom chair pulled close to the bed. The man was seated upright, eyes open, unblinking, alive. The clock on the nightstand displayed a frozen time. 3:17. The batteries were still full. The report ends there. No follow-up. No conclusion. Just a timestamp. Filed at 3:17 a.m. Local time. So if you're still awake, check the time and listen carefully. Because if you don't hear anything at all, that might be the moment. It already knows. You're listening. If you're still here, still awake, then whatever you felt during this story wasn't an accident. Some people close the video early. Some people look away. Some people tell themselves it's just a story. But you didn't. And that means you're paying attention. If you've ever heard something you couldn't explain, a sound that didn't come from anywhere, a moment where sleep felt unsafe, write it below. Not for answers, for patterns. And if you want to know when the next story surfaces, when another signal slips through the silence, stay connected. Subscribe, because some warnings don't repeat themselves loudly. They wait for the people who are still listening.